In the dimly lit streets of New York City, Michael, a 32-year-old struggling construction worker, walked home after another exhausting day. His worn-out boots dragged against the cracked pavement, his mind burdened with unpaid bills and an uncertain future. He had once dreamed of being an artist, but life had steered him onto a different, harsher path. As he passed by a small pawn shop he often ignored, a glint from the window caught his eye. Curious, Michael stopped and squinted through the dusty glass. Inside, beneath a layer of fingerprints, lay an old, intricately designed pocket watch. Something about it felt familiar, though he couldn't pinpoint why. The chime of a bell signaled his entrance as he stepped into the shop. The musty air carried the scent of aged wood and forgotten memories. An elderly shopkeeper greeted him with a polite nod. "Can I help you with something?" the shopkeeper asked, his voice warm yet weary. Michael pointed toward the display case. "That watch, can I take a look at it?" The shopkeeper carefully retrieved the watch, placing it in Michael's calloused hands. It was heavier than he expected, its golden casing engraved with intricate vines and an unusual symbol, a compass surrounded by tiny stars. "Where did this come from?" Michael asked, turning it over. "Ah, that one's a mystery," the shopkeeper replied. "It came in with a box of old trinkets from an estate sale a few months back. No one's shown much interest until now." Michael opened the watch and froze. Inside the lid, engraved in delicate cursive, was a name. E. Miller. His heart skipped a beat. Miller was his mother's maiden name, and the initial matched his late grandfather, Edward Miller. "E. Miller," he murmured, his fingers tracing the engraving. The shopkeeper tilted his head. "You know the name?" I think this might have belonged to my grandfather," Michael said, his voice trembling. Memories of his mother telling stories about Edward flooded his mind, how he was a watchmaker before disappearing mysteriously when Michael's mother was just a child. But Michael couldn't afford to indulge in sentimentality. "How much for it?" he asked, masking his excitement. $200, the shopkeeper replied. $200, an impossible amount for Michael, who barely had enough for his next meal. His shoulders slumped as he handed the watch back. "Thanks, but I can't afford it," he said, his voice laced with disappointment. The shopkeeper studied Michael for a moment, then smiled. "I see you're attached to it. How about this? I'll hold it for a week. If you come back with even half the amount, it's yours. Otherwise, it'll go back on display." Michael nodded, grateful for the gesture. As he left the shop, his thoughts were consumed by the watch. Was it really his grandfather's? If so, how had it ended up here, so far from the small town his family had lived in? Determined to uncover the truth, Michael vowed to return for the watch. But with only a week to gather the money, he would have to make sacrifices he hadn't imagined. Little did he know, the watch would soon lead him on a journey that would change his life forever. Michael couldn't stop thinking about the pocket watch. That night, as he sat in his tiny apartment, the faint hum of the city outside, his mind raced with questions. Could it really have belonged to his grandfather? What secrets did it hold? Determined to buy the watch, Michael started making sacrifices. He skipped meals, walked to work instead of taking the bus, and even sold an old guitar, one of the last remnants of his artistic dreams. By the end of the week, he had scraped together just enough. When Michael returned to the pawn shop, the elderly shopkeeper greeted him with a knowing smile. "You came back," he said, pulling the watch from beneath the counter. Michael handed over the money, his hands trembling slightly as he took the watch. "It's mine now," he whispered, feeling a strange sense of connection as he held it. That evening, he examined the watch more closely. Its craftsmanship was remarkable, each detail meticulously engraved. But something about the compass symbol on the back nagged at him. It seemed familiar, as though he had seen it before. He called his mother, Lisa, hoping she could shed some light on the mystery. "Mom, I found something," he began hesitantly. "It's a pocket watch. It has Grandpa Edward's name engraved on it." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Edward's watch?" Lisa's voice was tinged with disbelief. "That's impossible. It was lost decades ago, long before you were born." Michael described the watch in detail, including the compass symbol. Lisa gasped. "That symbol? Edward used to put it on everything he made. It was his signature as a watchmaker," she said. "Where did you find it?" Michael explained, and Lisa's tone grew serious. "If that's truly his watch, it might hold clues about what happened to him. He disappeared without a trace, Michael. No one ever found out why." Her words sent a chill down his spine. What if the watch could answer questions his family had been asking for years? Michael decided to dig deeper. The next day he visited the public library, poring over old records and archives related to Edward Miller. After hours of searching, he stumbled upon a grainy black-and-white photograph in a 1960s local newspaper. The photo showed Edward, standing proudly in front of his workshop, holding the same pocket watch Michael now possessed. The caption read, "Local watchmaker Edward Miller, celebrated craftsman of timeless elegance." As Michael stared at the photo, something caught his eye. In the background of the image, faint but visible, was the same compass symbol carved into the door of the workshop. Fueled by curiosity, he decided to visit the address listed in the article. The workshop was long abandoned, its windows boarded up and its sign faded. But as Michael stepped inside, he felt an eerie sense of familiarity, as though he had been there before. Among the dust-covered tools and broken furniture, he found a small hidden drawer in one of the workbenches. Inside was a yellowed envelope sealed with wax bearing the same compass symbol. Michael's heart pounded as he opened it. Inside were several letters, all written in his grandfather's handwriting. The letters revealed a startling truth. Edward had uncovered evidence of corruption in a powerful local business. He had planned to expose them, but before he could, he vanished. One letter stood out. It was addressed to my family, and dated just days before Edward disappeared. "If you are reading this, it means my fears were true. I couldn't leave without ensuring my legacy would find its way back to you. This watch holds more than time, it holds the truth. Follow the compass and it will guide you to what I could not finish." Michael's hands shook as he read the words. The watch wasn't just a keepsake. It was a key to uncovering his grandfather's disappearance. As he left the workshop, the weight of the mystery bore down on him. His journey was far from over, and the next step could lead him into dangers he never imagined. Michael sat at his kitchen table, the letters spread out before him like pieces of a puzzle. Edward's words echoed in his mind. "Follow the compass, and it will guide you to what I could not finish." But what did that mean? The compass symbol engraved on the watch had to hold the answer. He inspected the watch more closely, running his fingers over the delicate engravings. Suddenly he noticed something he hadn't before. A tiny latch near the base of the compass symbol. With a gentle press, the back of the watch popped open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a small, folded map and a note written in Edward's handwriting. "To those I love, this map leads to the truth. Trust in the stars to guide you." The map was old and fragile, marked with cryptic symbols and a route leading to a wooded area just outside the city. Michael's pulse quickened. He couldn't do this alone. He called his best friend, Daniel, a history enthusiast and amateur treasure hunter. Daniel arrived within the hour, his curiosity piqued by Michael's story. "This is incredible," Daniel said, examining the map. "Your grandfather left you a literal treasure hunt. But why?" Michael showed him the letters and explained the corruption Edward had uncovered. "I think he hid something. Evidence, maybe. Whatever it is, it's important enough that he risked everything to protect it." The two set out the next morning, the map in hand. The wooded area was vast and eerily quiet, the towering trees casting long shadows over the ground. They followed the marked route, their boots crunching against leaves and twigs. After hours of searching, they reached a clearing. At the center stood an old oak tree, its trunk scarred with the same compass symbol from the watch. "This must be it," Daniel said, excitement in his voice. Michael began digging near the base of the tree. After several minutes, his shovel hit something solid. He unearthed a small metal box sealed tightly. Inside, they found a stack of documents, a leather-bound journal, and a small audio recorder. The documents were contracts and financial records, proof of embezzlement, fraud, and bribery by a powerful corporation that had once dominated the town. The journal was Edwards, detailing his discovery of the corruption and the threats he had received after trying to expose it. The final entry read, "If I do not return, let this evidence speak for me. The truth must come to light, no matter the cost." Michael's hands shook as he read the words. His grandfather had sacrificed everything to protect this evidence, but why hadn't he returned? Daniel pointed to the recorder. "Let's see if this has any answers." Michael pressed play, and Edward's voice crackled through the years. "To my family, if you're hearing this, it means I didn't make it. They've been watching me, trying to silence me. I hid this evidence for you to find, to finish what I couldn't. Be careful. They'll do anything to keep their secrets buried." A heavy silence fell between them. The weight of Edward's sacrifice was clear, but so was the danger they now faced. "We need to take this to the authorities," Daniel said. Michael nodded, but a gnawing feeling of unease lingered. If Edward's enemies had silenced him, what would they do now that the truth was resurfacing? As they packed up the evidence and began their journey back, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The shadows of the forest seemed to shift around them, the air heavy with tension. Edward's story was far from over, and Michael was determined to finish it, no matter the risks. As Michael and Daniel made their way back from the woods, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. Every rustle in the trees, every distant movement, seemed like a threat. Michael couldn't shake the fear that someone, or something, was closing in on them. They reached the edge of the forest, where the city's skyline began to emerge from behind the trees. Michael's phone buzzed with a message from his mother. It simply read, "Be careful. Someone's been asking about you." His heart skipped. Who could it be? "Michael, we need to go to the police right now," Daniel urged, his voice tense. "If what's in those documents is real, they'll try to stop us before we can even talk to anyone." Michael nodded, but he hesitated. The truth was, he wasn't sure he could trust the authorities. If Edward's discovery had caused him to disappear, what would prevent them from doing the same to him? The deeper he got into this mystery, the more it seemed like he was walking into a trap. But there was no turning back now. Edward's message, his grandfather's legacy, had to be honored. The truth had to come out, no matter the cost. As they drove toward the police station, Michael's instincts screamed that they were being followed. He kept glancing in the rearview mirror, but saw nothing unusual. Yet the feeling lingered, gnawing at him. Just as they pulled up to the station, a sleek black car screeched to a halt behind them. Two men in suits stepped out. They didn't look like police officers. "Michael Miller," one of them called out, his voice cold. Michael's pulse quickened. "Who are you?" The man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We've been looking for you. You have something that doesn't belong to you." Before Michael could respond, the other man stepped forward, his hand reaching into his coat. Without thinking, Michael grabbed Daniel's arm and pulled him toward the station. "We need to get inside now," he shouted. As they ran toward the door, the men gave chase. Just as Michael reached the entrance, the doors slammed open, and a police officer appeared, drawing his gun. "Stop right there," the officer commanded. The men halted, eyeing the officer with suspicion. The officer, a seasoned detective, recognized the tension in the air. He turned to Michael. "You don't know who they are, do you?" he asked quietly. Michael shook his head. "No idea." The detective glanced at the men, his expression hardening. "These men work for the corporation your grandfather was investigating. They've been silencing people for years. They've been after that evidence." Michael's breath caught in his throat. "But I have the evidence. I can prove it all." The detective nodded. "We've known about them for a while, but we needed someone like you to bring it to light." A tense silence followed. The men in suits seemed to realize they had lost, but they didn't show fear, only cold resolve. "Get in," the detective said, motioning for Michael and Daniel to enter the station. "We'll take it from here." As Michael stepped into the station, the door closing behind him, he finally felt a sense of relief. The truth was out. His grandfather's legacy, his sacrifice, had been honored. The battle wasn't over, but it was a step toward justice. In that moment, Michael knew that the watch was more than just a relic of the past. It was a symbol of resilience, a reminder that no matter how deep the corruption, the truth would always find a way to the surface.